The morning started like any other for Marcus Chen, a former Marine sniper turned forest ranger in the mountains of Colorado. He was checking wildlife cameras near Eagle Peak when the sky split open with a sound like thunder mixed with breaking glass. Above the tree line, massive ships appeared, their hulls gleaming silver against the blue sky. They were nothing like the sleek vessels from movies. These looked organic, almost grown rather than built, with surfaces that seemed to breathe and pulse. Marcus dropped his equipment bag and reached for his binoculars. Through the lenses, he could see smaller craft detaching from the motherships, descending toward populated areas. His radio crackled to life with panicked voices from park headquarters, then went silent. The electromagnetic pulse had hit, taking out most electronics within a 100-mile radius. The aliens had been watching Earth for decades, studying human behavior through intercepted broadcasts and satellite feeds. To them, humans appeared weak, divided, and technologically primitive. Their leader, Zeftar, stood in the command center of the primary vessel, his elongated form draped in bioluminescent robes that pulsed with his emotions. Currently, they glowed with amusement. "Such a fragile species," Zeftar observed to his second-in-command, watching feeds of panicking humans on multiple screens. "They fight among themselves constantly, poison their own environment, and their weapons are laughably primitive. This will be simpler than subjugating the rock dwellers of Kepler 442b." The initial invasion proceeded exactly as the aliens predicted. Major cities fell within hours. Their energy shields deflected missiles and bullets alike, while their plasma weapons carved through military installations like hot knives through butter. The creatures themselves stood 8 feet tall, with gray-blue skin that seemed to shimmer with an internal light. Their technology was so advanced that they treated the conquest more like a controlled experiment than a war. In Washington, D.C., the president and his cabinet huddled in an underground bunker as reports flooded in from around the globe. London, Tokyo, Moscow, Beijing, all under alien control. The visitors had set up processing centers where humans were being cataloged and sorted like livestock. Some were kept for labor, others for what appeared to be biological studies. The lucky ones were simply ignored, left to scatter into the wilderness. Marcus made his way down the mountain, avoiding the main roads where alien patrol craft hummed overhead. He'd seen enough war to know when a fight was hopeless, but something deep inside him refused to accept defeat. As a sniper, he'd been trained to find weaknesses, to wait for the perfect shot, to turn the impossible into the inevitable. 3 days after the invasion began, he reached the outskirts of Colorado Springs. The city was transformed. Alien structures had sprouted from the ground like metallic mushrooms, connected by bridges of hardened light. Human survivors moved through designated zones under the watchful eyes of floating sentinel drones. Marcus set up an observation post in an abandoned radio tower on a hill overlooking the city. Through his spotting scope, he studied the alien patterns, their movements, their technology. The invaders moved with casual arrogance, their energy shields constantly active but seemingly automated. They paid little attention to scattered human resistance fighters who occasionally took pot shots with conventional weapons. On his 4th day of observation, Marcus witnessed something that made his blood run cold. A group of human children had been separated from their parents and were being loaded into transport vessels. The aliens showed no emotion, treating the crying children like cargo to be moved efficiently from one location to another. That night, as Marcus cleaned his rifle, a custom .300 Winchester Magnum with modifications he'd made himself, he thought about his younger sister, Sarah. She'd died in Afghanistan, killed by an IED while delivering medical supplies to a remote village. Before her deployment, she'd told him, "Sometimes you have to take a stand even when you know you can't win. Sometimes the gesture itself matters more than the outcome." The aliens had made one critical error in their assessment of humanity. They measured strength only in terms of technology and unified military might. They failed to understand that humans were most dangerous when they had nothing left to lose, when they were pushed beyond the breaking point where survival instincts gave way to something deeper, the refusal to go quietly into extinction. Marcus began planning. He studied the alien patrol patterns, their hierarchy, their apparent command structure. He noticed that certain individuals wore different markings, moved with more authority. The shields that protected them seemed absolute, but Marcus had learned long ago that every system had vulnerabilities. The question was finding the right angle, the perfect moment, the shot that could change everything. As he prepared for what he knew would likely be his final mission, Marcus couldn't have imagined that his actions would spark something the aliens had never encountered in their 1,000-year history of conquest. A species that refused to be broken, that found strength in hopelessness, and that could turn a single act of defiance into the beginning of their downfall. The aliens continued to laugh at human resistance efforts, dismissing them as the death throes of a primitive species. They had no idea that among the scattered survivors, a former Marine was teaching them the most dangerous lesson in the universe: never underestimate a species with nothing left to lose. Marcus spent 2 weeks studying the alien command post that had been established in what used to be the Colorado Springs city center. The structure defied conventional architecture, appearing to grow from the earth itself with twisted spires that pulsed with bioluminescent energy. Alien personnel moved in and out with clockwork precision, but Marcus noticed something crucial. Their energy shields flickered for microseconds during transport between vehicles and buildings. The moment lasted less than a heartbeat, but for someone trained to measure shots in fractions of seconds, it was an eternity. Marcus calculated wind speed, distance, and trajectory over and over until the mathematics became second nature. The target would have to be perfect, not just any alien, but one whose death would send shockwaves through their command structure. His opportunity came on a Tuesday morning when long-range sensors detected what appeared to be a high-ranking delegation arriving at the Colorado Springs facility. Through his scope, Marcus watched as sleek transport vehicles disgorged several aliens whose bioluminescent markings were more elaborate than any he'd previously observed. One in particular caught his attention. A towering figure whose robe seemed to contain entire galaxies of swirling light patterns. Zeftar had come to personally oversee the processing of human specimens from the North American continent. To him, this was routine administrative work, no different from cataloging mineral deposits on conquered worlds. He moved through the facility with absolute confidence, his personal energy shield generating a faint shimmer in the air around him. The alien commander paused at the entrance to the human holding facility, consulting a bioluminescent datapad that materialized from his robes. For exactly 1.3 seconds, his shield generator cycled through a reset sequence as he transitioned from his transport's protective field to the building's integrated defense system. It was a gap so brief that their own security protocols hadn't even registered it as a vulnerability. But Marcus Chen had been waiting for exactly that moment for 9 days. The shot traveled 847 meters through thin mountain air. The bullet, a custom-loaded match-grade round that Marcus had crafted himself, struck Zeftar precisely at the base of his elongated skull. The alien commander's bioluminescent robes flared brilliant white for an instant before dimming to absolute black. His body crumpled to the alien metal walkway as his entourage stood frozen in disbelief. For several seconds, nothing happened. The alien security systems hadn't even detected the source of the attack. Then chaos erupted. Every alien within the facility began emitting high-pitched vocalizations that sounded like digital screams. Their previously orderly movements became frantic as they surrounded their fallen commander. Advanced medical equipment materialized from seemingly nowhere, but Zeftar was beyond their technology's ability to restore. The bullet had been precisely placed to cause maximum neurological disruption to their species' unique physiology. The news of Zeftar's death spread through the alien fleet faster than light-speed communication should have allowed. On the primary mothership, Sub-Commander Velkas received the report and felt something his species had not experienced in over a millennium. Genuine shock. The humans had killed a high commander, not through overwhelming force or technological superiority, but with primitive projectile weaponry and tactical precision that shouldn't have been possible from such an undeveloped species. Marcus didn't wait to observe the aftermath. He'd already planned his escape route, moving through drainage tunnels and abandoned subway lines that the aliens had overlooked in their urban reorganization. By the time their search drones reached his firing position, he was 3 miles away and moving deeper into the Rocky Mountain wilderness. The alien response was swift and brutal. They leveled 6 city blocks around the shooting location, turning concrete and steel into molten slag. Thousands of human survivors who had been sheltering in the area were vaporized instantly. The message was clear. This was the price of resistance. But something unexpected happened. Instead of breaking human morale, the aliens' overreaction had the opposite effect. Word of the successful assassination spread through survivor networks with remarkable speed. Humans who had resigned themselves to slavery suddenly began to whisper about the impossible shot. The sniper who had proven alien invincibility was a myth. In hidden bunkers and mountain caves, resistance cells began forming with new purpose. If one man with a rifle could kill their commander, what could organized groups accomplish? Former soldiers emerged from hiding to share tactical knowledge. Engineers studied salvaged alien technology for weaknesses. Children drew pictures of Marcus Chen as a modern-day David facing down Goliath. The aliens found themselves dealing with something their conquest protocols had no provisions for. An insurgency fueled not by hope of victory, but by proof that the enemy could bleed. Their psychological warfare experts, who had broken countless species through displays of technological supremacy, couldn't comprehend how showing their vulnerability had actually strengthened human resistance. Sub-Commander Velkas ordered increased patrols and tighter security protocols. Shield generators were upgraded, and no alien personnel were allowed to move without full protective details. But these very precautions revealed another human strength the aliens had underestimated: adaptability. Each new security measure was studied, analyzed, and eventually countered by increasingly sophisticated resistance operations. A network of former military snipers began coordinating their efforts, sharing intelligence about alien movements and weaknesses. They called themselves Chen's Ghosts, in honor of the man who had fired the shot heard around the world. Each successful operation, each alien casualty, each proof that the invaders were not gods but merely advanced beings with exploitable vulnerabilities added fuel to the growing rebellion. The aliens' greatest mistake had been assuming that breaking human military resistance would break human spirit. They had conquered governments and armies, but they had never faced a species that could transform individual acts of defiance into collective mythology. Marcus Chen's bullet had done more than kill one alien commander. It had shattered the psychological foundation of the entire occupation. As resistance networks grew stronger and bolder, the aliens began to realize they weren't fighting a conventional war anymore. They were facing something far more dangerous, a species that had learned to find strength in apparent weakness, unity in scattered resistance, and hope in the darkest of circumstances. The laughter had stopped, replaced by the first stirrings of something the alien empire had never experienced in 1,000 years of conquest: doubt. 6 months after the shot that changed everything, Earth had transformed into a planet-wide guerrilla war. Marcus Chen had become a ghost himself, moving through the wilderness networks that connected resistance cells across continents. His simple act of defiance had grown into something he never could have imagined. a global underground movement that the aliens couldn't seem to stamp out. The Resistance had learned to exploit weaknesses that the aliens didn't even know they possessed. Human children, considered harmless by alien security protocols, carried messages and small devices between cells. Elderly survivors, dismissed as non-threatening, served as lookouts and information gatherers. Every demographic that the aliens had categorized as low priority became part of an intelligence network that spanned the globe. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a former aerospace engineer who had been presumed dead in the initial bombardment of Houston, had spent months studying recovered alien technology. Working from a hidden laboratory in the New Mexico desert, she made a breakthrough that would have seemed impossible before the Chen assassination. The alien energy shields, while incredibly advanced, operated on principles that could be disrupted by precisely calibrated electromagnetic pulses. The discovery spread through resistance channels like wildfire. Suddenly, every electronics hobbyist, every garage inventor, every basement tinkerer became a potential weapon designer. Improvised EMP devices, built from salvaged car parts and alien debris, began appearing at coordinated resistance strikes across multiple continents. Sub-Commander Velkas found himself facing reports that defied logic. Human attacks were becoming more sophisticated, more coordinated, more effective. Worse, they were spreading to other worlds in the Empire. News of human resistance had somehow reached subjugated populations on distant planets, sparking uprisings that had been dormant for centuries. Species that had accepted alien rule for generations were suddenly asking the same question that humans had answered with that first sniper shot. What if the invaders weren't truly invincible? The alien empire's foundation rested on absolute technological supremacy and the psychological certainty that resistance was futile. But Marcus Chen's bullet had introduced a concept that their empire had never encountered: the power of symbolic victory over overwhelming odds. Now, across dozens of worlds, enslaved populations were beginning to experiment with the radical notion that their oppressors could be hurt, could be killed, could be defeated. The situation reached a critical point during what resistance historians would later call the Seattle Uprising, a coordinated attack involving over 300 resistance fighters armed with improvised EMP devices and conventional weapons overran an alien processing facility and freed nearly 2,000 human captives. The operation succeeded not because of superior firepower, but because the humans had learned to fight like humans, unpredictably, desperately, with nothing to lose. More importantly, they had learned to record everything. Helmet cameras, recovered alien surveillance equipment, even simple cell phones that had been hardened against EMP showed the world that aliens could run, could bleed, could die in terror, just like any other living beings. The footage spread through hidden networks, reaching survivor communities on every continent. Marcus Chen watched the Seattle footage from a cave in the Canadian Rockies, surrounded by a new generation of resistance fighters who had never known a world without aliens. They called him the First, the man who had proven it could be done. But Marcus saw something different in their eyes now. They no longer needed proof that aliens could die. They needed to know how to kill them more efficiently. The resistance had evolved beyond symbolic victories into a genuine military force. Former soldiers were training civilians in guerrilla tactics. Scientists were reverse engineering alien technology at an unprecedented rate. Most dangerously for the occupiers, human children were growing up in a world where fighting aliens was normal, where the impossible had already been proven possible. Velkas received the order he had been dreading. The Imperial Council was considering abandoning Earth entirely. The cost of maintaining the occupation had exceeded all projections. Military resources that should have been conquering new worlds were tied up fighting an insurgency that grew stronger with every passing month. Worse, the Earth virus of resistance was spreading to other colonies, threatening the stability of the entire empire. The final confrontation came not as a massive battle, but as a series of simultaneous strikes across the globe. Resistance cells that had been growing and learning for over a year launched coordinated attacks on every major alien installation on Earth. They used tactics the aliens couldn't predict, weapons the aliens couldn't fully counter, and a level of coordination that shouldn't have been possible with primitive communication systems. The attacks weren't meant to drive the aliens completely off Earth. That was still beyond human capability. Instead, they were designed to prove a single devastating point, that holding Earth would cost more than the planet was worth. Every day of occupation would mean more casualties, more resources drained, more examples of successful resistance spreading to other worlds. Marcus Chen participated in the final assault on the Colorado Springs Command Center where he had fired the first shot. This time, he wasn't alone. 300 resistance fighters moved through the alien facility with military precision, neutralizing security systems that had once seemed impenetrable. The aliens fought back desperately, but they were fighting humans who had spent a year learning to be more dangerous than any species the Empire had ever encountered. When the smoke cleared, Sub-Commander Velkas stood in the ruins of his command center, facing a circle of humans who had every reason to execute him. Instead, Marcus Chen stepped forward and delivered a message that the alien commander would carry back to the Imperial Council. "Tell them," Marcus said quietly, "that Earth taught you something your empire had forgotten. Sometimes the weakest species become the strongest when they have nothing left to lose. Take that lesson to every world you've conquered. Show them what we've shown you. Your empire's greatest fear shouldn't be human resistance. It should be what happens when every enslaved species realizes they can fight back." Velkas was allowed to leave with a skeleton crew and a single ship. Within 6 months, the Imperial Council voted to abandon Earth entirely, marking the first time in their 1,000-year history that they had retreated from a conquered world. The decision sent shock waves through the Empire as dozens of subjugated species began organizing their own resistance movements. Marcus Chen died 3 years later, not in battle, but peacefully in his sleep in a cabin he'd built in the restored wilderness of Colorado. His funeral was attended by representatives from resistance movements on 17 different worlds. The aliens had laughed at humanity's weakness, but Marcus Chen's legacy became something far more powerful than any weapon, proof that the impossible was just another word for not yet accomplished. The shot that shattered alien invincibility became the first note in a symphony of liberation that would eventually free dozens of worlds and topple an empire that had seemed eternal. Sometimes the most important victories begin with a single person refusing to accept that defeat is inevitable, and sometimes one bullet fired at the right moment can change the course of galactic history.